tastes a little bit like, wow. Woohoo!
Hi, I'm David Burns, and I'm passionate, I'm intense about beekeeping. I've been keeping bees for a long time, and I've been making YouTube videos on beekeeping for well over a dozen years. I have a lot of videos on YouTube on beekeeping, but one thing I've never done in all the years I've been putting YouTube videos up for beekeeping, I've never done a basic how to keep bees video. And so that's what I want to do today. I want to offer you a video to help those of you that are brand new to beekeeping, or maybe those of you that have been doing it a few years, but you still haven't figured out what in the world you're supposed to do. I want to go through some basic things on beekeeping. So first of all, this is considered a hive here. And where I live in Illinois, it requires me to have two deeps. These two deep bodies are called hive bodies, where the brood, or the main part of the colony lives. They raise their young here. They store some honey, some pollen to actually raise all the brood. And normally a beekeeper does not take or remove any kind of honey or any kind of food sources from the two deep bodies. This is for the colony. Now this is a honey super, and typically it's been practiced this way for well over 100 years, and this is where the bees put excess honey. And it's called a honey super. A little smaller because it makes it easier for us to lift it off. It's not so heavy. This can weigh 30 or 40 pounds fully loaded with honey. And next we have a top cover. Like this is a top cover. It kind of hangs over the hive to keep the water from coming inside the hive. And then next we have the inner cover. Inner cover is a cover that provides a little bit of a barrier between the actual hive components and the outside of the box. The inner covers that we make here, they have little notches here to increase ventilation so your frames don't become moldy in the winter and such. This is the honey super, and as you can see, it's a box like this. It fits on top of another box, and inside of it, though, there are frames. Now, these are undrawn. That means the bees haven't worked this yet. It's new material. It's a wood frame with a food-grade plastic insert with beeswax added to it, so the bees draw that out and make it wider. And they'll make a comb on top of this imprint, the hexagon imprint already that's there, and it speeds it up. So there's 10 of these in the box, as you can see here. And next below that one, we have the same thing, only since it's a hive body, this is where the bees are going to raise all their young. Similar frame, only 3 inches longer. And so you have to have 2 of these if you live where I do in the north. If you get way far south, a lot of beekeepers only use 1 deep, but because we go through winter here in Illinois and in the north, we have to have 2 of these so the bees can have enough stored resources to make it through the winter. Eventually we get down to the bottom board, and on the bottom board is commonly referred to as a screen bottom board now, and this helps control varroa mites. A lot of mites can fall through this. And it also increases ventilation. So in the summertime, when the bees are trying to dry out the nectar to make honey, this will increase their opportunity to get a lot of that moisture out of the hive. But we really enjoy it most to get rid of the varroa mites out of the colony. Now, this is a hive stand that I pulled out of the yard. It's a little dirty, but the bottom board fits right in here. And then you just stack all your boxes on top. You want to keep your hive about 6 to 8 inches off the ground. 6 to 8 inches off the ground will keep your hive from getting too close and get moisture on the ground. So it's important to have it up off the ground. Now you can use cinder blocks, you can use pallets and things around the house if you want to. Just make sure you get it up off the ground. Other things I want to show you, because this is a basic introduction. Since we do have varroa mites, and if you're not aware of what those are, a pest that came into our country in the early 90s, and they've wreaked havoc. Most of your struggles as a beekeeper is going to be combating the varroa destructor mite. So we recommend using a green drone comb. This is a comb that you put in your brood nest area, and they'll put brood in here that's male drone larvae, and the varroa mite likes to go into and lay eggs on drones because they're in there longer. You simply take this out, freeze it, and you kill a lot of mites at once. Just a brief introduction. This is called a beetle blaster. Another problem that we have in keeping bees is small hive beetle, especially those of you in the south. We put a little vegetable oil in this, and then we put it in between the frames like that. And when we do that, the beetles are chased into this beetle trap and drowned, or essentially are suffocated in the oil. So it helps trap small hive beetle. Beekeepers often use other things like pollen patties. You just lay these on top of the brood nest area to give the bees a little more protein. Very common. We also use pollen powder. This is pretty commonly used in my operation, and my customers enjoy putting pollen powder in their sugar water, and then they feed that to the bees to give them more protein. Bees live off of carbohydrates and protein. Carbohydrates is the nectar of the honey that bees consume, and protein comes from the pollen that bees gather from flowers. So they're kind of on the same diet that we as humans are. We also use other things such as Honey Bee Healthy, and you can see here this is a great way to help the bees stay healthier and clean their gut out a little bit, but mostly it's advertised as to help the bees consume more sugar water. In seasons when you're trying to feed your bees, you add a little bit. This is very concentrated. Add a little bit of this, smells like lemon, and it attracts the bees. It's a feeding stimulant. Other cool tricks and tools, look at that. This is actually a refractometer. If you've ever made beer or wine, I think that's used in that as well. But you put a drop of honey on under the scope here and close it, and you look down through this end, and there's a scale in there. It will tell you that your honey is at the proper moisture. You don't have to use this. It's not that expensive. This one is about $30. But if you want to, you just wait until all the honey is capped over, and that's generally safe in knowing that the honey is ready to be harvested. But this is called a refractometer. Also, you've noticed, if you've done any research in beekeeping, you'll see beekeepers using a smoker like this. This is a smoker that's been around forever. It hasn't changed much. You use this to calm your bees. So before you make your hive inspection, you put a little smoke at the entrance, you smoke under the hood, and then you can work your bees, because the smoke actually confuses the bees because they're not able to communicate. Bees communicate through the spread of pheromones, and so when they're trying to communicate and their pheromones are received by the antenna collects micro particles of the smoke, I guess, and now they can't really communicate by picking up these pheromone odors through communication. They just kind of stop doing much, and they calm down a lot. Smoker is really important. You can use smoker fuel like pine needles. Sometimes people use twine. Just make sure it's kind of organic, doesn't have any chemicals on it, but your choice of whatever smoke. You want a dense smoke. You don't want flames coming out. Next, we have the hive tool. This has been around forever. This is the traditional looking hive tool. We do have several different models out today, a J-hook and so on, but this is a good one. It's tempered steel. This is painted. It comes to a real wedged point here. This allows you to get in between your boxes and separate them, because once your hive is up and going strong, the bees are going to use a propolis. Propolis is a substance they gather from trees and plants, and they actually bring it back into the hive and kind of glue all their pieces together. And that's how these boxes can sit on each other and not blow away. And you'll have to use this to separate it. You can scrape. So this will be your best friend next to your smoker. You got to have a hive tool. I'll show you a few other things about, just basically getting started in beekeeping. This is called a queen excluder, and it can come in metal. This one's a plastic one. I like plastic just fine. Look at this. These slots are small enough that the queen, she can't pass through this. She's too large. Her thorax is too large. But the worker bees can pass through. So the reason this sounds good is if you want your queen to stay down in here in the brood nest area and not lay eggs up in your honey super, then all you need to do is slide this queen excluder all the way in place here, and then that will hold your queen down and allow the workers to pass through it that. And now your queen is held in the brood nest area here, and all the workers can take the honey and store it up above. It's a really neat way to do that. Also, some common things that you're going to want to get probably starting out are some gloves. I don't use gloves, but I've kept bees for a long time, so I manage them and work them in such a way to avoid being stung. And you'll learn that. But at first, a new beekeeper, you might say, ooh, I got to wear some gloves. I understand that. You might want to get a bee brush. There are times you may want to brush some bees off of some frames, or if they're stuck on here on a rainy day, whatever. You might just find a bee brush to be real handy. This is a feeding system that I personally invented. And in certain times of the year, we have to feed our bees. And this feeder allows us to put it on top of the brood boxes. You take this off. You put this on top, and then you're able to put a shell around it and put jars of food here, and then maybe a pollen pad you push through here. So this is just a feeder board to feed your bees from the top, and especially in the fall and in the spring. Well, what about the winter? Well, in the winter time, this is something else that I invented. It's called the Winter Be Kind board. And as you can see, it's filled with carbohydrates and proteins, vitamins and minerals. And so this actually goes on top of the hive upside down like this. Food is facing down. So you put it on top of your two brood nest areas. You take this off, put it on top of this, and then put your top on. And then your bees can fly in and out in the wintertime. If they need to go to the potty, bees never defecate inside their colony. So on warmer winter days, they'll take a little potty break and fly back in, and then they can stay fed in the wintertime. And this is a good tool. So this is an extractor, and many of you have probably heard of an extractor, but you actually crank the handle like this, and as you turn it, what happens, it spins the honey out of the honeycomb that you opened up with the knife. You usually use a cold knife like this to cut the caps off of the honeycomb out of these supers, and then you put them in here and spin them, and centrifugal force forces the honey against the wall, and it runs down to the bottom. It collects down here, and then you open the valve here called a honey gate, and as you open it like this, honey flows out, and you can then strain it if you want to. You don't necessarily have to, but if you don't strain it, you'll have a little bit of wax that may flow to the top of the honey. And this is called your honey extractor. Okay, so when you're starting beekeeping, most people are going to buy a package of bees, which is 10,000 bees or about 3 pounds. And today we use a plastic container like this. Some of them are made out of wood and screen. The queen is in her own little cage. She's mated, sometimes marked, but she's not available yet to walk around with all the other bees. And so when you take your package apart, you'll take the queen cage out and set her aside. And I've got videos you can watch on my channel to show you how to install the packages. But you simply remove the candy, shake all the bees in the bottom single deep, shake them all out of here, and then you take your queen cage and you'll open up the little candy cap and then set it in there and let the next day or two, all these bees will eat through the candy and release the queen, and she'll be their new mom, and the hive will take off. 3 pounds is a good number to get rolling in the season. So if you haven't already bought your package, you need to hustle, because if you're watching this during the winter, packages sell out really fast. So be sure to do that. Get your packages bought even before you buy your equipment. Make sure you've secured your bees from someplace. We recommend you find a good, reliable source for your honeybees, somebody that's done it for a while. Be careful about buying bees from someone you may not know their reputation. Of course, you know that. But once you shake them in here, then you don't add these boxes. Instead, you wait until the hive kind of gets pulling out some of these frames, adding wax to them. And when they get about 5 frames, you add this box, 5 frames, you can add your honey super at that point. So how do you get started in beekeeping? We kind of talked about the equipment and some basic things that we use to feed bees and get them rolling. Well, first of all, let me say it is imperative that you do take a class. And it's important that you find the class where it's taught by someone who's well knowledgeable on beekeeping. There's a lot of certified beekeepers now, and they teach classes. You need to know all the nuances of beekeeping, particularly in dealing with pests and diseases. This can be a challenge today. I'm just going to be honest with you. Beekeeping isn't magical. You just don't throw bees in a box and it all works out. It does require you to know what you're doing. It's just like if you bought a brand new car and you didn't know how to drive it, it would be disastrous. First, you have to learn how to drive the car, and then you buy the car, right? So it's the same way with beekeeping. It's really imperative that you know what you're doing, or else you're going to be very disappointed. I really believe today that a lot of the bees, a majority of the bees that we see perishing, that we hear about that are dying, unfortunately are dying because of poor management, mismanaged hives by new beekeepers who really failed to educate themselves on beekeeping. Now, I don't have time in these videos to give you a whole day or two of instructions on how to keep bees, but there's somebody in your area. You don't have to take one of my classes. I'm not trying to get you to do that, although I'm proud of the classes that I offer, of course, but certainly find a place, someone that's reputable that has classes. We have online classes, and educate yourself during the winter months so in the spring you'll be ready to roll. So as a certified master beekeeper, my responsibility and that I feel really strong about is to help you be successful. And sometimes that's really challenging with all the pests and diseases that are facing colonies today. And some of you are probably wondering too, I may have my hive close to a farmer's field. Will chemicals affect my bees and all? And those are things that you really need to make sure you research. In a hive like this, you need to inspect your colony about every 2 to 3 weeks. And what you're looking for is to make sure they have eggs, make sure that everything looks good. And that's why you need to know how to identify pests and diseases, because if you don't, they can get a pest and disease and you won't know it and they'll collapse on you and die. So there is some basic information that you're going to need to know to get rolling. Again, I just can't take time today. I'm just giving you a basic overview of what you need to plan for. So inspecting your hive about every 2 to 3 weeks, making sure the queen is healthy. She's laying a lot of eggs. The queen, there's only one queen in here. Out of when the hive gets full size, there's 40 to 80,000 bees, one queen. That one queen lays approximately 1 to 3,000 eggs a day. And I did not misspeak. 1 to 3,000 eggs a day. And so you need to make sure she's healthy. These bees in the summertime only live about 35 to 45 days, and then they die of being, working themselves to death. They're quickly replaced by the eggs that the queen's laying. So in summertime, you've got to be aware that you've got to have a strong queen. If you lose your queen, or if she isn't laying that many eggs as she's supposed to, your hive will go down in population, and then your hive will eventually perish, and that'll be frustrating. You spend a lot of time, money learning beekeeping. Watch your queen. So you're going to have to invest that much time in inspecting your colony. You can add as many supers as you want. Once they fill this one up, you don't have to harvest it. You can add another one on top of it, on top of that one. Some people have really tall hives with a lot of these honey supers being filled up with honey. Generally, the first year, the bees are adding so much wax to the nest area that they're not able to make enough wax to really turn all that nectar into honey and the supers. The second year is generally when you get most of your honey from a hive. But I've had a lot of customers tell me on their first year they've gotten 100, 200 pounds of honey off of their hive. So you just never know. It depends on where you live. Hey everybody, thanks for watching my video on how to become a beekeeper. I've given you the basic of basic elements. This is by no means a beginner's class or a basic class at all. Those classes can take anywhere from 5 to 20 hours or more to really help a beekeeper know the basics of becoming a beekeeper. I do encourage you to take a class. It is, in my opinion, essential for you to be a successful beekeeper. But my video today hopefully has given you at least enough information to whet your appetite to pursue the beekeeping endeavor that you know you want to do. If you've liked this video, please subscribe down in the corner below or like it. We'd love to do more videos, and when you subscribe and like our videos, it challenges us to do more. We'll see you next time.